So let's start walking through, and into the Piazza Signoria. That's named, of course, for the council that governed Florence. The Signoria, the seniors, governed the city, so you had a council of the seniors. And so this is the Palazzo, and we're going to walk into the Piazza. The palace now, we know it as the Palazzo Vecchio, the old palace, because the newer palace, the Pitti Palace across the river, was newer, so that meant that this palace became known as the Old Palace. But in the time of Dante in 1300, this was the Great Palace. This was the biggest city palace in all of Italy. So let's walk into the piazza. Here we are looking back over the tops to the south side of the river. Gives you a nice view of the palace. And you can see all the way to Boboli Gardens and the south side. So let's go into the piazza. This is the center of Florence. This is certainly the center of contemporary Florence. And so at high tourist peak time, this will be packed. Every tour group comes here, so every tour guide is bringing his people here. And that building was built in Dante's time, and the council moved into it in 1300, so exactly the time of the Divine Comedy, exactly what we're talking about here tonight. So that is a building of Dante's life and of his time. And that's exactly what we should think about when we see it. Here's a nice place to have your cappuccino. We're looking over there at the door to the Palazzo. There's the phony copy of David on the left side. The real David, of course, is in the museum in the Accademia. But this is a wonderful place to have a breakfast. Then let's take us out of the piazza and start to walk into Dante's neighborhood. So we're just going to go right straight through there. That little narrow street that you see is a typical medieval street. That's the typical size of a street in Florence that dates from the 11 and the 1200s. So just wide enough for a man on a horse to ride through. And if a man on a horse does ride through, you have to jump into the store to get out of his way. So there's not room for man and a horse and a person. That's how narrow it is. Certainly not wide enough for cars, modern day cars. So that's not available to cars. Motor scooters could use it for a while, but they can't anymore. So all this is closed to pedestrian-only traffic. So the area we're entering into, Dante's neighborhood, is completely closed to cars, and that makes it nice for walking. Here's our map, and so you can see where we're entering into his neighborhood right there, just off of the piazza, and we're going to go right into this neighborhood here. And if we just take a look at this picture, this is his neighborhood. That is the part of Florence that's between the tower of the Palazzo and the dome of the cathedral is his neighborhood. It's that section of territory. And so we're going to go right in that street that we just saw, past the motorcycles, all of which are parked there, and let's go in. Now, see how narrow that street is? This is one of the purest, least change, most perfect medieval streets. It's called Via dei Cerchi, C-E-R-C-H-I, and the Cerchi were a major family of Dante's time, and this street was named for them. And you can just see that the buildings come right out over the edge, so builders of the palaces were always pushing their buildings out more and more and more, as much as they possibly could, so they could gain more space inside their palaces. And then the government said, no, you can't do that, because they were cutting off the sun. There was no sun getting into the streets. So they made them tear them down. So it's rare that any of them have these still left on them. Here's a nice little horse and buggy who's taking some tourists on a nice little ride around the city. The only problem with the horse and buggy is, as you know, horses do something that a lot of people don't like. So these pretty little stones. Now look at the street. Look at the street. You see those paving stones? Those paving stones have been there 1,000 years. When they fix anything on a street like this, it's all stone. Every single piece of stone has been cut by a stone cutter. Has been shaped, hand-shaped to fit into that spot. And if they have to fix that street, if they have to take it up and maybe put a pipe or something under it, they number the stones, and they lay the stones on the side of the street with the number on it, so they will know exactly where to put it back. Here's a nice vista up one of the side streets, looking up to the high tower of the Abbey, which you can just see in the distance. And here's just a pretty little store with wonderful ceramic and things. It's a great street for shopping, wonderful street with, here's one of my favorite stores. Look at, isn't that just wonderful? Mauro's Frutta. I lived in this part of Florence for years. I rented it in a pensione. It was right here. And so I would walk down this every single day. Walk down this street every day. And Mauro, that's him standing out there in front. And he's very, very funny and very interesting. You can see the spectacular work of art that he's made there with his fruit. You see, every single thing has been put in beautiful colors and everything. So that Americans walk up and they start to grab the fruit. And he screams, no, non toccare, don't touch, no tocca, don't touch. And then person says, well, wait, you mean I can't choose the fruit I want? And then he'll have to explain, yes, you can choose it, but I'll get it for you. So you stand there and say, okay, I want that one. Okay, he gets it for you. I want that one, he gets it for you. Because, see, they work on these all morning, getting all the things into position. Isn't that a great work of art? It's just exactly like Dante's poem, And here we go along the street, Via dei Cerchi, there's the sign. Look at those old stones there in the corner. The restoration of that building, which they have done, they have put new plaster, is such that they leave that old stone corner so that you can see it, so that you can see the old structure below it. And then we go further. There's a little wine bar in this street. There's a pretty church there in the distance. Here's a little wine bar that everybody loves. And of course, there's no room inside. It's just a little wine bar out into the street. So everybody drinks in the street. So everybody stands around the street with their glass of wine. Can you imagine the state of California allowing that, to have a little wine bar that everybody stands in the street? The towns are a little more flexible about who gets to have a glass of wine and where they get to have it. And so you will go through these little tiny streets, and you come across this huge crowd of people, and you wonder what's going on, And here's another wonderful little fruit shop out in the corner there. That little fruit stand is up against a tower building that is 1,000 years old. That tower has been right there for 1,000 years. You can see the big, huge stone door. And then you come into this little piazza. We're about to turn into Dante Street. That's Bar Centrale there. And in the front of our picture is a tripe cellar. The Florentines love tripe. Do you all know tripe? Are you all familiar with tripe? Tripe is cow gut that they make into a steamed specialty. So the man there at his little cart is cutting up pieces of hot steamed tripe and putting it on panini, and the Florentines love it. They just absolutely love it. If you've ever had it, you may not love it. But and the street, Via Dante, is right there. We're looking right at it. So just as we turn here, there's Via Dante Alighieri. Right off of that street, we just walked right through there, and there's Via Dante Alighieri. And here's the view up the street to the tower that's right in front of his house. His house is right across the street from that tower. That tower was the first place that the Florentine government met. When they were first organizing their democratic government, they met in that tower the first time. So he and his family and his house and his neighborhood have been at the center of Florentine free government from the very beginning, before he was born. And then right across, here's another pretty picture of that tower. There's the sun setting on the tower. And then just on the other side of the street is his house. So that's his house right across from the tower. Here's another view of that tower. Those towers were like 3 times as high as that picture, but they were cut down at a point when the city gave an order that everybody had to cut their towers in half because they were too tall and they were dangerous and they were menacing everybody in the city. So they forced them to decapitate their towers. And right across from the tower is Dante's house. So there's Dante's house, and all these people are standing in the piazza in front of his house. Now, the building you're looking at is a reconstruction. Right behind it is the real house building, but it wasn't all there when they wanted to create what is a museum, etc. So they reconstructed it. So we're sitting here looking at the side of the building, and then there's a section from his poem posted on the wall, and all these people, all these guys are looking at the at the wall. And then right behind it is the actual building that had his house in it. And that building now has a trattoria. One of the greatest trattorias in all of Florence is right there, right behind Dante's house. It's called Da Pennello, and that means little paintbrush. Da Pennello, like penne is a little pen. So Da Pennello is a paintbrush, and a painter owned it and started it in the time of Michelangelo. So it's been there for 500 years plus in that building. Da Pennello, one of the greatest restaurants in all of Florence. And so here are all the people looking at his house. And right there to the right is a nice little museum. So that's the Museo del Dante. And then here's the front of the house. If you look up there, there's the tower with some of the windows that open up and that you can see. And then here's a little statue of him on the side of the wall, a bronze statue. So he's looking out into that piazza. And then here's the tower. So that's his picture there on his statues on the side of that. That's a museum now. So there's a little Museo Casa di Dante. And inside there you can see documents and things that have his signature on it, things like that are quite wonderful and fun to see. Very pretty little. And that's just around the corner. That's in that building right there. And here's performance art. You always get somebody doing something there because, of course, there are always people there to see the house of Dante. I'm sure you all realize that Dante is very possibly the most famous European writer of all time. More people know him than anybody. And so there are visitors from all over the world. It's not just Italians. You have, Poles and Hungarians and Germans and everybody visiting. And so there's always something going on in front of the house. And so the various street artists appear and do their little, this guy was doing a little sort of Chinese something. See his little flowers that he's laid down against the wall there behind him? You see all the flowers? He's put that there. That's part of his little show so there's always something going on. And then just down the street next to the house is the street where the church is, where he would see Beatrice, his beloved lady who he was in love with when he was young. He would see her in church. And if those people are staying there looking at the church, and if you go in there, you'll realize how much contact you'd have with somebody because the church is not as big as this room. So if you went to church, you would certainly see Beatrice. And the two of you would be together in the church. Here's the Church of Dante, Dante's church, and Beatrice's church, Santa Margherita. And then you go through that tiny little street, and you enter into this big busy street. This is the main east-west street of Florence. This is the most important east-west street. It's pedestrian. It's called the Corso, Il Corso, meaning, just like that word in English, course. This would have been looking east. So we're looking east towards the east gate of the city. And this is the main east-west street. So it would go all the way out to the east gate, which would be the porta toward Arezzo. And then the west gate would be the porta towards Pisa, and the south gate would be the porta towards Rome. And here now, this is a wonderful street, just full of stores, full of little cafes, little coffee places, and that's a delivery truck there. But other than that, there's no cars coming through. So very fun and interesting. This is Beatrice's house. And all of you in this room can tell the difference between Dante's house and her house. You can see that his house is smaller and middle, upper middle class, and she is absolutely at the top of the class. I mean, the top. This is the Palazzo Portinari. Her family was called the Portinari, and they were, what would be millionaires in our time, big, super rich aristocrats. And, of course, there was no chance whatsoever that he was ever going to get to have her as his wife because they were so separated by class. So he's in love with somebody he can't have. In other words, it's courtly love. It's courtly love. Right? Everybody recognizes that. He's in love with somebody he can't have, and it's exactly like all the literature of courtly love. He knows that. Remember now, it's 200 years old by the time he's writing his poem. Courtly love is a 200-year-old idea. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books and poems and novels that he knows, that he grows up reading, that he loves. So when he writes his poem and tells his story, circa 1300, he is already drawing on everything we just talked about. He knows all about Eleanor of Aquitaine. He knows all about Abelard and Eloise. He knows all about all those other poems that are written by the troubadour poets. All of that is part of what he starts with when he writes his poem. And at the center of his poem is Beatrice. She was a real person. He really was in love with her. And so it fit perfectly with his poem and with his story. It's a real story. It's a real palace. This was her family palace. You can visit it. It belongs to a bank now, and it's beautifully restored. And he was in love with her, and she was real, and he couldn't have her. So it's the perfect courtly love story. That's exactly what it is. There's the street, the Corso. And if we walk around behind it, up a little side street, look at that beautiful street. Isn't that beautiful? Little tiny narrow street, Via dello Studio. And right at the end is the cathedral. Can you see it? Yeah. And the reason it's such a wonderful picture is that you get a sense of how the cathedral looms up like a high-rise, like a skyscraper next to the little 1 or 2 story stores and houses that are right next to the cathedral. So it gives you a good sense. This building is like 3 stories high, so you're looking there at that cathedral, and that cathedral goes up like 10, 12, 13 stories high. And that's the way it is all around it. It just looms up over everything. Every street that you come along, suddenly there's the cathedral looming up above you. This even has a little curve to it, Via dello Studio. Wonderful, wonderful street. Tiny little street. I walk this street every single day, 2, 3, 4 times. And here's a sky shot of the cathedral and the tower and the baptistry, and the Medici Palace is up there in the left corner, and then the neighborhood we've been in is right there in the lower right corner of our photograph. It's just below the bell tower. That's where we've been walking. Via dello Studio is that little tiny street heading towards the cathedral, and that's Dante's neighborhood. We can look at it. Here's another picture of a street with the cathedral looming up over it. It's such a beautiful vision to have some sense of how this whole world, this world of Dante, revolves around the cathedral, revolves around the world of the cathedral, which itself was in the process of being built and was the largest cathedral in the world at the time. So the Florentines were building the largest wall, the largest architectural project anywhere in all of Europe, and the largest cathedral, and the largest government palace. All of those things were under construction at 1300. So just imagine what that meant in terms of money. Just imagine what this meant in terms of the wealth of Florence, that at the very time that Dante writes his poem, this city of about 100,000 could afford to build the biggest wall of any city in Europe, the biggest cathedral of any cathedral, and the biggest city palace. All of it was being built at the same time that other great buildings were being built too. So it's an amazing, you can see the sun is going down. See how the sun is coming through? It's a wonderful thing about these cities where, the sun will go down in the west and it'll come through the gate and it'll just send this beam of sunset light right down that street for maybe an hour, for 30, 40 minutes, and you'll get this magnificent light that'll come all the way through the street. And then, of course, the sun goes down. Well, the sun is going down, right? Down at the Ponte Vecchio, the sun is going down. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Oh, I love that picture. Sunset at the Ponte Vecchio is one of the great experiences. And, of course, the lights are coming on along the river, and the lights are coming on over the thing.